2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Diese Rede ist der Saphir.
This speech is dedicated to weeping Sophia. If you wanted to know the exact sources, I would like to ask you to get hold of the written version of my speech, because you'll find footnotes. In the history of Turkey and also of the Ottoman Empire, there's not a sole example for a hostility or for cunning or for attacks on the part of Jews on the Turks or the Kurds. Nevertheless, in my childhood, I very often heard, Jews are pigs, the biggest scourge on mankind, or you can take a Jew's life, but you can't take his money. The Turkish and Kurdish left is mostly anti-Semitic. The Jew is always to blame for any kind of misery, conspiracy theory. If a politician is unpopular, he's obviously of Jewish descent. Jews are also blamed by the mullahs in Iran for political misery. They are to blame for any evil. The positive deeds of the Jews are kept quiet about. The Ottoman Empire is referred to in discussions, however, which received the Jews when they were expelled from Spain. The economic reasons are not mentioned, like the double taxation of Jews, because non-believers as Christians and Jews have to pay for their existence, and the business acumen of Jews is not mentioned either. ISIS wants to collect money from the Christians in Mosul, and this is due to the fact that the capitation tax is based in the Quran. Fight those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day until they give the jizya willingly while they are humbled. The fact that there were sultans, or that there are sultans that get money from Jews, can only be seen in Turkish soap operas. The earthquake of 1999, well, the Jews are to be blamed for it. Let's not forget the September the 11th, because they say that no Jew died, and allegedly the deed was done by Jews. When, after the attack on the synagogue in Istanbul, I asked a taxi driver, he said that the Jews had bombarded themselves. Recep Tayyip Erdogan also wept for Palestinian children on TV in 2004. He said that he could feel that pain as a father and understand it. But roughly a month ago, a pregnant Jewish woman with their 4 children was shot dead in her car by 2 Palestinians. What about his compassion there? Does it hurt less when Jews are massacred? The same happens in Palestine. There are videos, there are movies in which Jews are compared to pigs. Where's my presentation? It's coming right up. There are films in which Jews are compared to pigs, and in the textbooks of the Palestinians, the message is implicitly communicated that violent fight and suicide are an appropriate reaction to the current situation. A direct call for the jihad is missing, but the language used is connected to jihad and war. Why are those people who partly have never got to know a Jew, why are they anti-Semitic? Among the enlightened intellectuals of Turkey and the Middle East, well, among them, there's just a lot of silence, apart from some exceptions. One is Ilhan Arslan, and I translated his book, and you can buy it. Muslims are active. Just to mention one example, they even go to the point to propagate anti-Semitism on Facebook, the owner of which is a Jew. Mr. Ertugrul Kocadak explains there on Facebook that Jews were the most severe enemies of Islam. He thinks that the origin of the hostility of the Jews towards the Islam is that they are jealous because of Muhammad. And then a long, distorted justification follows. I'm not going to repeat here because of lack of time, but I would like to say the following. Chancellor Merkel says that the security of Israel is non-negotiable, but she leaves aside that her former Minister of the Interior, Mr. Schäuble, promoted the Islamic organizations to become consultants in the context of the integration of Muslim migrants. Islam is not only a religion, but it's a type of state and law. And this is why Mr. Schäuble introduced a law in Germany which not only impedes the integration of the faithful Muslims, but also introduces Islamic anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is based on the Quran. Mr. Schäuble has thus safeguarded his place in Islamic paradise. The Quran is deemed to be the law of the faithful. Just imagine that in the German constitution it would say, "Oh, you German people, do not take the Jews as allies." Can you imagine that? No, but the Quran says, "Oh, you who have believed, do not take the Jews and the Christians as allies." In the German constitution it would say, "So when you meet Jews and Muslims, strike their necks until you have inflicted slaughter upon them." No, this is unthinkable. This would be stipulated in the German constitution, but in the Quran it says, "So when you meet those who disbelieve in battle, strike their necks until you have inflicted slaughter upon them." So this is what Mr. Schäuble introduced. I can only draw the following conclusion. Mrs. Merkel gives with one hand and Mr. Schäuble takes with the other hand. Takes back. The city of Jerusalem and Palestine have a special religious importance for the three monotheistic religions. This part of the earth is called Holy Land by them. Muhammad undertook many efforts to convert the Jews to Islam. At the beginning, he said that the direction of prayer wasn't towards Mecca, but Jerusalem. He changed that several times when the rabbis annoyed him, and became a target of Jewish humor. Otherwise, the direction of prayer would still be Jerusalem, and this would mean we would have a much bigger conflict than is the case nowadays. But even if the churches and some synagogues use the common denominator with the Islam representatives in Germany that call themselves like that because the church is afraid to lose the privileges, they can do that, but still in the Quran it says that there is no other religion with God than Islam. God's religion is Islam, thus it says. Why God needs religion is not explained, but it's explained that God urged all the prophets sent by Muhammad to bow to him and to take the oath. So with that oath, according to Muhammad, also Jews and Christians would be obliged to believe in Islam. If the Jews or Christians break that oath, they have left the straight path and have to be considered as non-believers. So, in a nutshell, they can be punished. In the Quran, God announces that He's going to punish them. In the IBKA verses of verse 137 to 140, the fight between Muhammad and the Jews is repeated. When Muhammad declares himself a prophet, he was married to Khadija. Her family was diverse in matters of religion, as were many families. The predatory was by Muhammad with the Jewish tribes only took place after her death. She wouldn't have allowed for that because she had Jewish relatives. My suspicion is based on the Hadith interpreter Sahih Bukhari. In a tradition, an uncle of Khadija's is mentioned who knew a lot about the Torah. Probably Muhammad was informed by this uncle. When this uncle died, he lost his consultant. But the rabbis presented him with complicated cases to verify whether the Quran led to a better verdict. Muhammad was impotent against vis-à-vis their knowledge and was ridiculized by the still unmatched Jewish humor. He lost his hope to win over the Jews for Islam. So he turned them into his greatest enemy. He only had one aim: to annihilate the Jews and to steal their treasures. Many Islamists and Islamic historians think that Muhammad married Jewish women even for peace, at the sacrifice. This statement is cynical. Islam doesn't mean peace, but oppression. Muhammad didn't fight against Jews because he had to defend himself, but he attacked Jewish tribes at dawn usually and robbed their goods, but also their women. His warriors were given women as a reward. Any war meant wealth and for the men and for women, and it meant women for the harem or women as slaves for them. Some women were sold on, as the IS still does nowadays. With verse 5 of the Surah Al-Ma'idah, Muhammad was allowed to marry Jewish women. The purpose wasn't to punish the Jews that ridiculized him, but he had to wage wars to get an income for his warriors. So when the bounty was divided, 1/5 was for the prophet of God, so for him. But there were some Jewish tribes that surrendered without a war, and so he added a surah to the Quran that if God won without any war, the bounty would be for him, as for him the prophet. He would get everything. So this really is entrepreneurial spirit. It's particularly the war of Muhammad against the Jews of Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza, which became famous as the Chima War. I would say it was an attack. This was unrivaled when it comes to brutality. He had the friends of those that still had friends among the Jews to prove their faith. The brutality of that order shows his personal mortification, his thirst for revenge, because he was impotent vis-à-vis the wisdom of the rabbis that had ridiculized him. In Chaiba, he robbed Safiya. I dedicate this speech to. Safiya had recently been married when Muhammad attacked Chaibar. She went down in Arabian literature as the weeping Safiya because she had to witness how her whole family was tortured and beheaded. They were tortured because allegedly they had hidden a treasure. Is it possible that God, who knows everything and has created everything, is it possible that he really wanted that? Didn't God know where this treasure had been hidden? Is he so impotent? Muhammad had promised rich bounty to his warriors. Wasn't there enough bounty? Did he therefore find the fairy tale of a treasure? Arguments of peace or religion couldn't have been the reason for these attacks, the brutality and the robbing of women for his soldiers and his harem. The founder and first president of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Dr. Judah Leon Magnus, once said, "The only secure basis of for a Jewish community in Palestine would be the goodwill of the Arabs. The Jews couldn't maintain themselves in Palestine by mere military power." And he's right. The problem is that many faithful people, when they kill a Jew, really believe that they are following God's commandments or orders. It is true that after the Second World War, Palestine was sieged in a targeted way after the Holocaust. But can a law that arises as a consequence of injustice, can this prevail forever? Why were the Jews not allowed to found a country? Hitler, Germany had deprived them of any kind of good and real estate and had killed them as much as possible. and the Nazis were supported in a benevolent way by the mullahs, but Germany hadn't offered the Israelis land. The historic displacement of Jews from Palestine can be read in the Torah and the Christian books of history, but what is unknown is the displacement by Muhammad and his successors, as well as the displacement from countries that today are deemed Arab countries. But there it is deemed to be acceptable because it is subject to divine law. Today, the Arab territories are not Ummah like in the time of Muhammad, but nation-states. But nation-states are a necessity of the capital. Is there a kind of double morality, or does this lead to other topics that should be discussed in a critical way because they are no longer Ummah? Information by and education by Arab Muslim people on the anti-Semitism in Islam is an obligation and a necessity at the same time. The hatred and racism based in religion in the Quran has to be educated about, and that's also in the interest of all Arabs so that they can deal with each other on a state basis. Who says that that the different groups have to live where they are living right now, because racism, the hostility in Quran is not only limited to the Jews, but it extends to other Arab tribes and black Muslims. And Muhammad places his own tribe above all the others. He even takes it so far as to declare that the people of his tribe are above all the others, and the Qurayshi women are deemed to be the most beautiful women in the world. Of course, we the populace can't see that because of the dress code nowadays. In a nutshell, education in the Islamic countries should be linked to subsidies and sanctions, as happens in the case of Pakistan, or should be linked, or trade should be based on that topic, linked to that, in order to promote peace and information on the anti-Semitism and racism in Islam. Let us think about our capabilities, let us review and rethink our attitudes, and let's do whatever is needed. Fragen?
Büchner, mein Name.
My name is Büchner.
Mich wundert, wenn im Koran,
I'm a little surprised to hear
so
that in Quran, that was written 100 years after the death of Muhammad, that anti-Semitism is mentioned so explicitly. Why did it manifest so much later only in the Islamic world? I think that this is due to the fact that Muhammad, when he lived, annihilated lots of Jewish tribes and expelled them, some of them. So in Arab countries, there were just a few Jews, and they didn't have to attack them at all because there were none left. But the bad thing about it is that this anti-Semitism, as it's written in the Quran, implicitly it is a law. My name is Martin Heller. I would just like to point out that there's also the perspective that Muhammad never existed, and that the Hadithites are an invention, and that the conquests didn't take place. Luxemburg, Ohlich, these are some names I would like to mention. I know you know that perspective. But this also exists with regard to Jesus, but still we're dealing with Christianity. So what?
I
have to deal with that matter. I'm obliged to do so. I come from Eastern Anatolia. My grandfather took part in the Armenian genocide, destruction. In the territory where I come from, there used to live Jews. You can tell because there's some research done by some families, and there are still documents from the Ottoman Empire where there's the Jewish star because they in the document because they wanted to monitor if the people really went to religious service to take part. There are no Jews anymore there. In the church, their temples weren't allowed to be restored or renovated. They are ruins in part, or they were transformed into mosques. And it apparently doesn't bother a Muslim soul to pray there. So this is the reason why I'm obliged to go through life with my eyes open. And I didn't just migrate to Germany and didn't deal with that matter anymore. You spoiled me with Immanuel Kant and Nietzsche.
Mein Name ist Rüdiger
Biedermann from Frankfurt.
Ich fand die Rede für mich sehr überzeugend und erfrischend.
I found that your speech was very convincing, but I have a question. I also argue sometimes. I'm not a Quran expert, but what happens is that people tell me I was hostile vis-à-vis the Islam. Just because I ask these questions, I make statements in Germany and I would insult Muslims. This happens very often when I'm arguing. What an honor.
But this is
the result of Mr. Schäuble's policy. He appointed the Islamists to be the advisors of the German government and thus pay tribute to them. And these are caricatures that have risen or that have raised themselves to be experts in Islam. And it's really easy to find out the connections and the ties they have with organizations. But our secret service, our intelligence service doesn't care about that. They just serve the Americans, giving all the information to the US because they are just, they were just bored and don't have anything to do. Sorry, that's all I can tell you. Thank you very much.